Hey, it's Paul here from the Off the Comma podcast. And if you've been following the podcast, you already know that it's about amazing human beings sharing amazing stories about their experience with being stuck and getting unstuck. And you've probably wondered, hey, whatever happened to that guest? What's happened since they were on the show? So that's what this is all about. We are checking in with various podcast guests and just taking 15 minutes to see what's going on in their world. So, deeper connection, learning more about our guests, seeing how life unfolds for them. Enjoy this conversation, and we'll see you on the next one. All right, Sally, I'm super excited to have you here. And it has been since episode 28, which was in January of this year. So 4-ish, 5-ish months since we last talked to you. And I'm glad to have you back to do kind of a podcast guest check-in with you. How you
Yeah,
doing, Sally?
thanks for having me back. This is great. I love this kind of format where you check in with people a couple months after the fact. This is great. I'm doing good.
Yeah, yeah,
How about you?
it's I'm good, thank you, and it's nice because well, there's a couple of elements we introduce here, right? One, we get to see your face, which it doesn't happen in the original podcast episode. Two, we get to hear what's been happening since you were on the show. So sometimes guests have things to share, and then there's kind of updates, and other times it's just how are you doing? So there's no real, formal structure to these check-ins. I'll just ask you, what have you been up to since you've been on the show? What's going on in your world?
What have I been up to? That's a nice open-ended question, Paul. In the past 4 months, let's see. Maybe I could start with a little bit of just a kind of a refresher for all of us as to
Hmm.
what my episode was about, because I had to do some digging back of the cobwebs, even though 4 months of what we really talked about in my original episode. And one of the things I think I've come pretty far along in the past 4 months is really releasing a lot of the shame and the embarrassment around my drinking habits.
Mm.
And we talked about kind of my sobriety story and becoming a sober coach and kind of that whole journey over the past, it's been about 2 years, but we talked about that in my original episode. And one of the questions you had asked me, I think offline, not during the episode, was what can I release into the universe once the story is told? And I love thinking about it in that context of, the episode was almost like a coming out story of like, here's my
Mhm.
sobriety story. I'm putting it out there. It's going out into the universe for anyone who wants to listen. And it felt really good after, just to get it out there. And I don't know, I haven't gotten any real feedback from people who have listened to it. The purpose of your podcast is to share stories.
Mhm.
And I felt just almost like this release of the shame, the embarrassment, because it's out there. And like I said, it's anyone who wants to listen to it, fine. That's my story. It's life, right? It's the truth. It's what happened, and I've come a long way since sharing the story and since getting sober. Um, Almost 2.5 years ago. So I'm almost 2.5 years into this whole sobriety journey.
Mhm.
And it feels
Mhm.
really good. Yeah, just to let it out there. And anyway, so I wanted to kind of start with that because that was a little refresher for me also, is what did we talk
Yeah.
about in that original episode?
Well, yeah, and I so appreciate you sharing that because and the coming out story really is relevant, right? Because I've talked to so many folks, and I think I even experienced this myself a little bit, when it comes to ending our relationship with alcohol and deciding to return to sobriety, there's the doing the thing and what it brings us, and then there's the how much do other people know or what else do we
Hmm.
share and so forth. And so it's not uncommon for folks to reclaim sobriety and then also feel a certain way about talking about it. And yet,
Yeah, I was, if I could just chime in there, I
yeah.
was really like scared, nervous, anxious. I don't know what right emotion to use here, but about sharing it publicly. And
Hmm.
being sober is something we should celebrate because it's a huge accomplishment. It's really hard. And at least my journey was really hard. It was not easy.
Yeah.
And I was really kind of hesitant to put my message out there, either on LinkedIn or social media, and just to say, I've gone through this process and now I'm a sober coach and I'm launching this other part of my business and I'm super excited about it. But it had this like weightiness to it of like, oh, but that means people might think things about me, or they might
Mm.
make some assumptions about, they might judge me. And I had enough of my own judgment going on, a little of that
Yeah.
self judge, that inner critic going on, plenty of that to deal with. So I was really kind of hesitant at first to put the story out there because I just, my name is my brand, is my business. And it could have meant losing clients if they disrespected me or, judged me in a wrong way, or kind of jumped to those conclusions like I was this falling down drunk and really had severe problems, which I didn't. I was lucky. Um, to some degree that I didn't have that rock bottom story,
Hmm.
but I had enough of a story that I wanted to do something about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, and like you said, it's something to be celebrated, and it's a huge achievement and a huge accomplishment. And you shared with us earlier, you said you haven't gotten a lot of reaction since the podcast aired. We could certainly sit here and go back and forth about, well, how many listeners do I actually have? And it's still a
right.
young podcast and all of that. But it seems like part of your answer is right there, isn't there?
Well, I guess you're right that part of the answer is I didn't have any major backlash, right? I didn't have too many celebrations. I mean, I post plenty about on LinkedIn about my sober coach offerings and
Hmm.
different programs, and and I put your episode on my website. So I've done a handful of podcasts, and the links are all there if anyone wants to go in and listen before they sign up for a program or before they
Hmm.
want to do any coaching with me. Then my stories are there, and it's very accessible if anyone wants to listen to them.
Yeah, I love that because
So
it's kind of your origin story for setting up the
yeah,
whole coaching practice, and it's relevant. It's relevant,
yeah.
it's important, and it's all kind of contained right there, right? Like, what's it like to work with Sally? Why is this important work for Sally? So I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. So you've been up to a lot of things. I know this personally because I know you and I
Yeah.
follow you and we talk. But so what are some of the things you're up to now since January? You mentioned
Yeah,
some of these programs.
since January. So during the podcast that we did originally, that was in the middle of dry January, which is,
Hmm.
as just gets tons and tons of publicity, and just so many people around the world do a dry January effort. Um, I developed so first off, I kind of have two main offerings. I have for the sober curious, I offer a 31-day course that's a lesson every day along with weekly coaching calls. So a group
Mm,
coaching call every week, and then a 31-day course that's daily lessons delivered right to your inbox of about 10-15 minutes each. So you're learning something along the journey. You're not just giving up drinking or quitting drinking,
hmm.
right, for a month. Because the knowledge is so important to changing your behavior, right? So you have to have that knowledge foundational piece. So I designed this program. So I did one in dry January, and I realized kind of along the course of delivering it that I really like to connect with my learners. And so I added weekly group coaching calls to the 31-day course.
Mm.
And I decided I can't do that every month of the year. So I decided to do one every quarter. So dry January. For April, I did one I called the April Adventure because I couldn't think of a better name for it.
I like it.
It was kind of like a sober through the spring kind of offering of like, if you did dry January, you want to stay sober through the spring, here's some reinforcement of another program that you can do. So coming up, I have dry July. So that's another kind of effort in the sober curious community where you could do another month of dry January, or like dry January. So dry
Hmm.
July, and then sober October is coming up right after that, and then another dry January. So I kind of spaced them out there, so they're one a quarter. Um, and then so I have the 31-day course and group coaching effort for the sober curious, and then for the sober serious who really want to take a deeper dive and transform their relationship with alcohol. I offer a 6-month coaching program.
Mm,
So you get access to the course while you're doing it, so you can go through either during one of the monthly or the quarterly offerings, or just on your own. You start with that 31-day course, and then there's a number of other offerings that I include in the 6-month program. So yeah, so those are kind of the two main tracks. Also I should maybe mention is I'm a Gallup certified strengths coach. So strengths is embedded, Clifton Strengths, or formerly Strengths Finder, is embedded in everything that I do. So if you do the 31-day course, you get your top 5 strengths. If you do my full program for 6 months, you get your full all 34 strengths.
mm.
And I really embed strengths into the coaching, into the 31-day course. So there's lessons about strengths and what your strengths bring to the table, and how you can really leverage your strengths at your sobriety goals. So that's kind of the niche that I have within the sober coaching space, is really leveraging an individual's strengths and talents and pointing those or aiming them at their sobriety or their alcohol-free goals.
I really love that. I really appreciate that. I'm familiar with strengths. I've certainly been through that assessment and familiar with my top 5 strengths. And it's such a unique approach because it sort of doubles down on the whole possibility mindset, right?
Mm,
What I love about it and what you're bringing into it is that, all the sober coaches that I know, it's all about possibility. It's all about what you're gaining. And
yeah.
yet you're adding this other element, which is all about your capability,
Yeah.
which I
And
think is just so cool.
yeah, and your talents. And what I found, it's a really nice compliment to just giving up drinking, or focusing on what you're gaining, is when you're able to really focus on what you do so well and do that naturally and incorporate that into the conversation about giving up alcohol or focusing on what you're gaining. Some people have natural abilities of doing certain things, like if they're super competitive, they have competition talents, then like turn it into a game, see how long you can
Mhm.
go, right? Something like that, or a contest.
Yeah.
If you have achiever talents, that's another easy one to aim at your alcohol-free goals, is go 2 days, go 4 days, go a month, and then like you constantly achieve this goal, based on those talents. That you can really light up your talents by pointing them or aiming, purposely using them toward those goals.
Yeah. And so much more too, right? It can help you differentiate between where you might need to lean on others for support, where you can really double
Totally.
down for yourself. All the more reason to get in touch with you because there's so much
Yes.
to unpack, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Wonderful. I really love what you've shared with us. I really love how rich these offerings are that you're putting out there for the sober
Thank
curious
you.
and the sober serious, that distinction. And there's so much more that you could be telling us, but these are all such short check-ins. Sally, I'm going to put the contact information in the show
Perfect.
description. I'm assuming it's still the same
It is.
places as what we mentioned
Yep.
in the podcast, right?
Yeah. My last name is McGee, so you can find me at mcgeecoaching.com and on LinkedIn, Instagram. Yeah.
Perfect, and I'll put those links in the show description,
Perfect.
so
Well,
nice.
thank you, Paul. This has been fun.
Thank you
So
so
quick.
much for coming back, and we'll check in with I know that's always so short, right? But,
Yeah.
hopefully, this will prompt folks to reach out to you, and, I would also add that, it doesn't have to just be for yourself, right? Like, if you know someone
Oh,
who
totally.
is
Yeah.
asking questions and is curious, then the invitation is there. Have them contact Sally.
Absolutely. And Dry July is right around the corner. So
Wonderful,
thank you
wonderful.
so much, Paul.
Thank you, Sally, and have a great rest of your week, and I will be talking to you soon.
All right. Sounds great. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.